We're joined from New York by former U.S. Representative Vito Fossella. He served 12 years in Congress as New York City's only Republican representative. He is now the managing director of Park Strategies. Welcome to Newsmax again, Vito.
Thank you, Ashley. It's good to be with you.
First, as a native New Yorker, please give us your thoughts on the takedown of Osama Bin Laden.
On many different levels, I think it was great news in terms of attacking and getting the guy who orchestrated probably one of the largest mass murders in the history of this world, let alone the United States of America. And in a sense, I represented Staten Island and Brooklyn that lost too many people on September 11th. And I see so many of their families to this day. So I don't know if it was so much joy in their eyes as a matter, more of a function of closure, a loss to someone who caused them great pain, suffering, and harm. So on a personal level, I'm glad for them that they have a degree of closure. From a more sort of strategic point, I think it was a great boost for the country. I think everybody involved deserves a lot of credit for not letting up and getting the guy who did so much damage and carnage to this country and resurrected the notion that the United States will get whoever causes harm and won't forget, and as long as it lasts. So I credit the men and women in the military, intelligence, those Navy SEALs, upwards even the Commander-in-Chief deserves praise for carrying out this mission.
House Speaker John Boehner is sounding pretty resolute in calling for spending cuts that exceed any additional borrowing authority that Congress approves. Is Boehner's tough stand just what the country needs right now?
I think in large measure it is. Not too long ago, I indicated that the appropriate response for the Republicans to lay out was not to inherently oppose raising the debt ceiling, but to ensure that you have spending reductions that come along with it. I think it's a very reasonable proposition in light of the fact that we have unbelievable budget deficits and the debt that is exceeding $14 trillion to this day. It's one thing if the economy is growing rapidly and jobs are being created on a daily basis and there was no budget deficits were under control, but the fact of the matter is none of those things exist right now. Unemployment is too high, the deficits are too high, the debt as it exists is too high, and Washington still has a spending problem. So I think Speaker Boehner is exactly right to begin the dialogue. Now it's up to those who just want to raise the debt ceiling without reining in spending to come back with a counter-proposal. I haven't heard what that counter-proposal is, but if and when it does arrive, I think the dialogue can continue.
Some Senate Democrats are pushing repeal of several tax breaks for the largest oil companies. Is that a good idea, and what would the result be for energy development and gasoline prices?
Well, it's sort of separate items. One is by the tremendous spike in gas prices, I think it reaffirms the notion that many of us have argued for years, and that is we should figure out ways to get access to energy, to oil, to alternative fuels as well, in a way that does not bankrupt ordinary Americans. There's been a lot of reluctance built in, whether it's through rhetoric or regulation or just outright opposition to finding ways to find energy sources domestically. I think you can balance. I think you can do so in an appropriate environmental balance without unnecessarily punishing consumers. In terms of the tax issues, it's one thing to start throwing up red herrings, but I think if you really want to go after the tax issue, figure out a way to bring about major or comprehensive tax reform to the tax code that no ordinary American that I'm aware of can get through without a PhD in tax accounting.
President Obama has said there's nothing he can do really about soaring gasoline prices. Is that true?
Well, perhaps not in the short term, but I think over the long term it clearly is. Regardless of the rhetoric and the policies and debates that exist, the fact of the matter is the energy markets are rooted in supply and demand. The more we allow ourselves to build up the supply while demand remains the same, the market tells us that the price will come down. So if the administration wanted to think for the long haul, it would figure out ways to increase supply and ultimately it would have an impact. So perhaps on a day-to-day basis, he's absolutely right. But you can't do that day after day, month after month. In theory, let's suppose one day we decided we're not going to have any domestic drilling or any domestic resources whatsoever. The price would spike dramatically. Conversely, if we look to open up resources and open up increased supply, I think over the long haul you'll see a price beginning to drop, all else remaining equal.
The unemployment picture is still pretty grim. Can there be real economic recovery without jobs?
Yeah, I happen to never lose faith in the American people, and if given the right tools and the right incentives and with the right innovation and with appropriate balance of taxation and regulation, jobs will come back. But as long as the signal from Washington, D.C. is the regulations are fine, the taxes are fine, we're not going to see the job creation that's going to be necessary to build us out, get us out of this recession in sufficient time. The way to grow our deficits down and reduce, if you will, our debt is to truly put more people to work. And I haven't seen the appropriate recipe coming out of Washington that will allow that to happen. But in spite of that, in spite of those policies, I know so many hardworking business owners across this country are trying to do just that.
On the presidential campaign trail, some say former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney has a major political liability with the Massachusetts health care law. Is that an insurmountable obstacle, or can he plow through it? And if so, how does he do it?
I think there are very few things that are insurmountable. I think if anything, and I'm not suggesting I'm giving the governor advice here, but I think if anything is clear that the American people respect and accept someone who comes forward, if indeed it's a problem, say, listen, this was a mistake. I learned from my mistakes. This country learns from its mistakes. Individuals learn from their mistakes. Companies learn from their mistakes, and they move on. And I think if it's done in a right sort of way, an authentic sort of way, that people will accept it. There's going to be more than one issue. Is it good timing? Is it the best foot to be starting the race with? Probably not. But with that said, I'm willing, totally willing, to give the governor every leeway and every opportunity to come forward and explain. And it's not going to be the only issue in the race. May be important, but clearly it's not the only issue in the race. And I think the American people are wise enough, and Republican voters are wise enough to read through the person's understanding and the explanation of the matter as it's presented.
Former New York Congressman Vito Fossella, thanks so much, sir.
Thank you, Ashley. Good to be with you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.